Good afternoon, folks. I'm just going to give everybody another minute to join. We've got a good number of people rolling in here, but I know a lot of others registered here. So we're going to give everybody about 60 more seconds before we get started. Unfortunately, I don't have any dad jokes prepared, so I will spare you all. I've got one really good one, but I'm going to save it for Summit. It's my favorite. So I guess that's a plug. If you have not registered for Summit, we'd encourage you to check out summit.touchpointsoftware.com. We've got a really great event planned in Chicago with our partner churches, Village Bible, Christ Church, and Park Community. So got a lot of exciting things we'll be showing off at Summit, and a lot of great workshops and presentations, all kinds of stuff. So if you haven't signed up for Summit, I would encourage you to check us out and register today. I believe the hotel block might be coming to a close soon. So encourage you to get your hotel reservations, sign up for the excursions, all that kind of stuff. Again, summit.touchpointsoftware.com if you want more information on that. And we can drop the link to that in the chat here so that you can have easy access. All right, so I think we've got a good number of folks already joined us. So this is being recorded. So if you do join late, well, I guess you're not here to hear this announcement, but this, you can watch the beginning of it with the recording. So without further ado, we will kick off. Let me introduce myself. If you don't know me, my name is Chris Dolan. I'm the head of product here at TouchPoint, which means I basically get, it's my pleasure to work with our amazing development team, and I get to design and spec out the new features that our amazing, passionate team of developers get to build. And so you might wonder where those questions, where those features come from. It comes from feedback from people like you. Our whole team. I have a product team that helps me hear feedback from all of our different partner churches, and some of that feedback comes at Summit through various workshops and things. But we put together an annual roadmap, and this is one of the things we announced last year's roadmap that actually launched earlier this year. We have some churches that have been in the setup process, and we are excited to share what's coming here. And that is TouchPoint Sites, which is a partnership with a great partner of ours that if you haven't met, you should become familiar with them, and you will become familiar with them on this call. They were at our summit last year, and it is a company by the name of Solertiae. And Solertiae was actually founded by this gentleman in the middle here that you see by the name of Brad McElwain. And he is a former IT director like myself from one of our partner churches. And so he had a heart for serving more churches than his own, which is kind of similar to my story. And as I've gotten to know Brad, it's true. He has an amazing heart for serving the church. And so he started Solertiae to basically help walk alongside other churches that may not have the capabilities or resources to have, and IT and other managed services. And so I'll let him speak a little bit more to that. But basically, his company Solertiae does managed services for churches, and one of those that they are offering is TouchPoint Sites. So we have partnered with them to offer this new capability, and they're going to talk about it a little bit more. Also on the call here is Shane, who I've gotten to know quite a bit in the last year and a half. All the way from Guatemala, a great guy with a great heart for ministry, and has been walking alongside at several of the folks here on this call today, as well as others that may not have been able to join us, helping them get their sites set up. And so this partnership is really a partnership. We've done a lot of development work. They've done some development work. They've done a lot of development work on their end. And it's a two-sided thing to make this a really seamless integration so that your data from TouchPoint can make it seamlessly onto your website without anyone on your staff needing to know any kind of code or do any kind of work other than manage a few settings. that Brad and Shane and the team there at Solertiae will actually help you do. And so this call will talk through that, show you what's possible, show you some beautiful examples of some of the widgets that are available that will seamlessly integrate with TouchPoint, and all the configuration options, which are really endless. It's really amazing what we've been able to do together. And I'm going to turn it over to them so that they can actually show off the great work that they've done, and showcase and what's coming, what's launching here. So, Brad, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So we're going to hear from Barbara first in our team. She's a communication strategist. And so let me bring in Barbara.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited that we're going to go through these details together. When it comes to websites, there's a little bit of a happy place for me, simply because I've been doing this for about 22 years now, and I've been through so many variations of what the internet looks like. And so having developed and designed and created websites for many churches and many industries, even other organizations that have nothing to do with Christian churches, I've been able to see how over time the way that we interact and the way that we utilize websites have changed over the years. And so I want to bring a couple of thoughts to the table today. One of them is just this idea that the way that we now interact with websites has significantly changed. And that has to do with the fact that we're no longer looking for information. Although I can understand how sometimes, we'll do a Google search or we'll look into the contact page to find that one piece of info that we're looking for. But there's a greater role or function that websites have now that we didn't have, a decade ago. And so I want to start by addressing a couple of things that have changed in how we interact with the internet. So humans have, in the age of information, if you all can recall, the currency back then was your time. Like, am I going to spend time looking for something online? And that was the currency that we utilized in our interaction with websites. And then we changed. Little by little, we start moving towards attention being the currency. If you probably have heard that before, that websites want your attention, social media wants your attention, and that is because the game kind of shifted a little bit. And so we moved from just looking for information to looking for engagement. So we went from the information age to the engagement age. And then I believe, it is my belief, that we have already shifted into a new age of interacting with websites. And I believe that is the age of curation is the one that we're in right now. Now, the currency is no longer attention, although I still believe that plays a big role in how we interact with websites. Now the currency is trust. So can I trust a specific brand? And when I navigate through their website, is that website building my trust? Am I able to say, hey, this website is curating something for me? Now, picture this from this perspective. We no longer need websites when we just log in. Like, the first thing you see when you come to the first page is a bunch of information, all the events, all the things that are happening. And why? Because that is creating confusion. But decision fatigue is a real thing. So people are no longer interested in this huge array of things that come our way, and we have to be the ones deciding what to do next. That means the way we're interacting with websites, especially when it comes to church websites, is more about following a flow and a path than it is to just be bombarded with a bunch of stuff all at once. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because we have to understand the dynamics of the human brain and how individuals are interacting with websites in order to then create a tool that follows the way that our brains are now working. And so I would love for us to start thinking of websites as a tool of curation. Can I curate a path for those coming in? And I want to give you just a couple of examples of what this would look like, because it is my belief that if we start thinking a little bit more strategically about our websites, you're going to find that the results or, the engagement that you're going to get is significantly different. It's not necessarily more or less. I feel like those are more like vanity numbers that we follow, I want it to be intentional. So the people coming to the website, I want to guide them down a path that if it makes sense for them, it would be easy for them to follow. A couple of things we do in this case is to say, hey, we're going to have 3 navigations on the website. I know it sounds a little crazy, but if you think about it, when you first go into a site, at the very top, newcomer, new visitor, first time that you're coming into this church website, we're going to have maybe 4 or 5 buttons at the very top. Those 4 or 5 buttons are the most important next steps that would make sense for somebody coming for the first time. Okay. And if you look at your website, there's a good chance that right now your website might have anything between 20, 30, sometimes 40 pages, and it's a bunch of drop downs, and people have to go through all of those drop downs in the navigation and then decide what am I supposed to do next, right? And what we're doing is we're curating the path for them. We're creating a first navigation that makes sense for that first time person. Then we have what we call our hamburger menu. Some people call it the cookie menu. Well, however you feel like it that day, if you like cookies better than hamburgers. But it's those 3 little lines that you see in most websites towards the right or to the left. When you click on it, it brings down the whole menu. Now, on this one, it is okay for you to list all of your pages, because the person that is willing to click that button is willing to investigate a little bit deeper. They want to spend some time. They're looking for something in particular. Make sure it's organized in a way that makes sense. And yes, we probably should use some sub menus in this case to make sure that we don't have, 40 pages listed. But this is where all of your pages would live. And then at the footer, right at the bottom of the page, we want to have a mini menu, and that mini menu is going to be for the person that comes often to your website. We're talking giving, events, and maybe, I don't know, volunteer, things that would make sense for the person that is coming regularly. Now, I just gave you one quick example of how we can curate the path for those visiting the website and how this is uniquely designed for how our brains function right now. So we need to remember that the internet is changing fast. The way people navigate websites is changing fast, and we cannot be left in the previous version of how people navigate websites. So bringing you to today, we need to remember that the website you designed 2-3 years ago may already be obsolete, not in style. That could be the case as well, but it could be obsolete in the way that people now navigate and operate and just visit websites, generally speaking. And that's why I normally say, hey, after 2 to 3 years, it might not be a bad idea to start thinking about a new website. And this to say, just look back, like, when was the last time you created a new version of a website that is not just a new visual, right? Is there a more strategic approach? Is there a more intentional approach to how your website is designed to begin with? So keep that in mind. It would be my recommendation, 2 to 3 years, maybe create a rhythm in your communications where you already have that lined up. So if you just upgraded your website, make note for 2 years down the road to start thinking about a new one. Now, I'm not saying shift with every new thing that comes up. That is not what I'm suggesting. But the internet moves too fast, right? Things evolve and grow and develop too fast. So I'm not looking into, hey, let's follow the trends as much as it is, hey, let's follow humans. How are humans interacting, engaging with these tools that we're creating? So we're very intentional when it comes to being people first, more than trends focused. Now, that's step number 1. Mark in your calendars, 2-3 years down the road, it's time to rethink our website. And if it's been more than 2 years for you, this is a perfect time to start creating a new version. Now, there's importance in strategy. I believe that when we're creating websites, when we're creating the copy for those websites, that we cannot leave intentionality out. And I know some people call this strategy. Some people will call this marketing, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, what we're simply doing is saying, hey, we want to be intentional with the people. And so I love humanizing our audiences. I don't want to think about an audience in an abstract way. I don't want to think about it as like, oh, this mass of people that could potentially see my website. That's abstract. Can we humanize them? Can we think of the actual individual that lives in my neighborhood? What would I say to them if they're sitting across the table from you one day and they're asking me about my church? And so I want to be able to capture what's the DNA, what's the heartbeat, what's that one thing that makes you so unique in your area. It is my belief that God has placed a specific design, a specific heartbeat in your church that only you can fulfill, like only you can exist in that way in your neighborhood. And so we want to capture that. We want to be able to say, hey, what's inside? What is the design that God has given you? And let's make sure your website reflects that. And so I believe that every now and then we have a little bit more clarity. Can we grow in that clarity about what is our DNA? What is our message? What makes us so uniquely designed by God that there's no other way but to exist and fulfill that design that God has created us to have. And if that's true for you, if you have more and more clarity over time and you can see and you have this vision in your mind, then there's a good chance that your website needs to catch up to that. So we want your website to be a representation of what's on the inside. Don't go for trends, okay? I know there's amazing websites out there and they look awesome and they're trendy and they're beautiful, but we want to make sure that your website reflects what's already on the inside. We don't want any bait and switch here. We want people to see your website, capture that, that feel, and then when they show up, it matches, okay? So the strategic side that I'm talking about means, can I be intentional about capturing the DNA of who you are and the personality of those around us? Because let's be honest, right? Just demographically speaking, the people that you see in one state will be completely different than the people you will see in another state, just because of region and how they behave and operate. And so sometimes when we copy other churches, those are hand-me-downs, right? You're capturing something that makes sense for their setting, but it doesn't make sense for your setting. And so there's more power in capturing who you are than there is in just copying somebody else. I'm a big advocate of learning from others. Don't get me wrong. I love kind of observe and learn and see what others are doing. But I would say there's greater power in spending time getting to know you, understanding who you are, because then that allows you to live it out unapologetically. Like your church can be the church that it's supposed to be without having to apologize, right? And there's freedom in that. I believe that God will bless that design because he created that design, not you're copying someone else. And so when I think about being strategic, it doesn't mean that we're leaving God out. It doesn't mean that we're just creating a man-made plan. It simply means, hey, let's do the opposite. Let's capture the design that God has given us. Let's get to the core of who we are. Like, what is that heartbeat that is, so vibrant on the inside? And we want our website to reflect that on the outside. There's great power in that, 100%. And I've seen it over and over and over. There's freedom in being able to be who you are. Now, if I look through scripture, I see every single time how much of a desire God has that we would see our identity, because he knows that if we understand our identity, there's a lot that will flow from there. And so the freedom is exactly in that, in finding out who you are as a church, so then you can, live it out without any excuses. Now, when it comes to the more practical side of things, I talked about curation. I talked about, the different menus, just as an example of how we can create a path for people. But let's keep in mind that nowadays, there's a lot of different tools that are operating in an independent way. And so we have apps, we have databases, we have websites, we have social media, and little by little, now, instead of having one channel where I need to show up like I am as a church, now I have 20 channels, right? You have to show up on social media like you are, and you have to show up on the website like you are. And you just put all these tools together and it becomes overwhelming. And I want us to ensure that we're not running our resources very low. Why? We're exhausting our resources, time, people, money, you name it, right? Because there's so many things that we have to do repeatedly throughout all of these channels. And so one of the things that I've been noticing more and more is this idea of integrating them together. Not only it creates a greater way for you to communicate the same way throughout all these channels, but it also allows you to be effective, because when you updates, I'm sorry, that's the right word. When you update on one side, it would be able to update it in the other. So when we think about your database, your app, and your website, imagine having those three talking to each other. Imagine not having to repeat those, the same information 3 times. And guess what happens when the time changes and you forget to, update one of them? We know exactly what happens. There's confusion in our congregation. So our goal is to say, hey, are there ways nowadays to reduce confusion, reduce the time that I'm spending updating all of these tools, and create a more centralized place for my communications to be effective? And I think there are. Many platforms are now moving towards some sort of integration, either creating a way for two apps to talk to each other or building something that is integrated. And so what we have seen with TouchPoints is that you have the robust database, and now we're starting to integrate it with a platform that is robust in creating websites. So at this point, here's what I want you to know. I've seen many different tools, many CMS, church management systems, and I've seen a lot of content management systems for websites. In 22 years, I've kind of tested almost all of them. And, I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to tools. So I love playing with them. I love really spending time getting to, try these tools out. And sometimes I actually have to control myself because I can spend hours doing these things. And I can tell you that the tool that we're integrating with TouchPoints as a website platform is a very robust one, which is important. And at the same time is a very easy to use one. Because if there's something that I know about churches is that most of the people updating websites and creating these systems are normally not that tech savvy. And maybe some of you will have some of that knowledge, and that's amazing. I feel like nowadays it's a lot easier to kind of learn these skill sets. But let's be honest, none of us wants to spend time trying to learn HTML or CSS. And so we want to be able to utilize a tool that is easy, because eventually we want to have volunteers doing those updates. We want to have other people being able to go in and manage the site without difficulty. So imagine having something that is robust, that integrates with your database, and at the same time, not having to worry about somebody breaking it or somebody not knowing how to utilize it. Sadly, one of the platforms that we hear the most about is WordPress. And I can tell you, we've seen disaster after disaster after disaster. I'm not going to say one tool is better than the other because of my personal preference. I'm just going to share with you some experiences that I've seen in the past. And so WordPress is a tool that is very robust and is very capable, but in order for it to function well, it needs to have a very strong security, measures in place in order for it to function the way it's supposed to function. And so the first fallacy that I see often is us thinking that it's free. Well, the tool itself is free, but the tool itself by itself is not safe. It's not secure. In order for you to work with it in a way that is safe and secure, especially for a church, you would need to have a very strong security package in place, a team behind it, a company behind it, and that's when it becomes expensive. Now, let's not talk about maintenance, all of the upgrades, all of the updates that you have to do, all of the incompatibilities with widgets. And at the end of the day, what I've seen over and over and over, it is not an easy platform for most people to utilize. And I know some of you may have that knowledge, and I know you may be thinking, well, I have no issues with updating it, but we got to think about the other team members, because in some point in time, you're not going to be there. Someone else will be there. And I'm hoping that that person would be able to come in and make those updates, right? So keep that in mind, because we need to think of our resources in a very holistic way. Our time, our money, our team, our people, those are all resources that sometimes we forget about. If there's one person that can now manage WordPress well, what's going to happen when this person is not available? So let's create something that is, again, robust, and it needs to work well, and it needs to function well with your database, so you don't have the repeated data. But at the same time, it needs to be intuitive enough, easy to use, so that anybody can learn with just a couple of videos, for example, on how to operate. Like any other tool, this is going to have a learning curve. It's natural. So anything new that you come across is going to have that learning curve, and that is okay. But what I can tell you is that I've seen it over and over where people with very little tech savviness can go in and they can start updating and changing their website very easily. They can add pages, they can remove pages. And at the same time, this is my favorite feature. If anything goes wrong, you have a click button, a real button that you can click, and you can go back to the previous version. So even if for whatever reason, let's say you deleted a page or you made something that wasn't supposed to happen, it's very easy to go back to the previous version without having to hire a developer or somebody else to fix it. So it empowers you. It gives you power and control over your website in a way that you may have not had yet. So this tool is going to allow you to grow, expand, and be, like I was saying, like evolve as the internet is evolving without having to worry about the maintenance, upgrades, updates, and all these other things that come with it. From a security standpoint, That's one of the big pluses for me, is that I don't have to worry, is this safe? Is anything going to happen? There's a whole organization behind it that will make sure that that's in place. Now, I just want to finalize with a couple of thoughts, and then I'm going to let you all go for a little demo. So remember, we're in the age of curation. The way we interact with websites is changing. So I want you to see your website as a tool that functions even when you're asleep, right? It doesn't have to be something that is just an information hub. People are not looking for that as much, okay? And that's a very small percentage of people that are just going to your website for a little bit of information. We want to make sure that your website is doing something for your church, even when you're sleeping. And then second, bring in a little bit of that strategic thought. Like, how can I make this tool work in a way that is wise for our audience, for our team, for our resources, for our time? And I have found that this tool is the one that is really the most robust and most flexible. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to reach out with any questions, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.
Thank you, Barbara. Shane, you ready for the Dog and Pony Show?
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to go through a series of screens and show you more boots on the ground of what you can expect to see, how it works, and all the things that it does. And everything we're about to show you is live in production. You're just one setting away from utilizing all of these things.
Right on. Man, I'm really excited to talk about the widgets. We've been working on these for several months. So I want to thank Chris and his team, and like you said, the partnership. And yeah, so let's just dive into it. So on your screen right now, we're looking at the small groups widget in particular. And you can see that it has real-time filtering capabilities. So this kind of dovetails with what Barbara was saying, just like keeping the end user in mind, keeping things really intuitive and nice for your end user. So assuming they land on a page like called small groups, they would see, like, let's say 40 small groups, like all of your small groups church-wide, and they'd be able to filter it by like, okay, what campus is it? Or I just want to find the ones for like college-age students. So that's the real-time filtering. We also have something called pre-filtering, which is really cool, where like if you are in charge of the website, you'd say, all right, for the college page, let's pre-filter this for our visitors so that it's already just showing the college small groups. And then so on click of any of these items, it would take you to the details page. And so this is like a great opportunity to just render out like more fields, like who the leaders are, a description, like is it in person, is there childcare provided, all those details. And if you look at this GIF here, you could even embed a video, which is pretty cool. So we could go on to the next slide. So let's see here. And then for events kind of work a lot like the small groups do, but with the added functionality that you can display a calendar layout. So if we just wait just a minute here, or just a second, we'll scroll down and we'll see there's the card view. And then events also have this calendar layout, which is really cool. So then we could go on to the next slide here. All right, so the resource widget. The resource widget is very robust. It can handle sermons, videos that aren't sermons, let's see, PDFs, audio files, web links. And again, we introduced this real-time filtering capabilities. So imagine somebody comes to the website, they could see like who the speaker is, they could see all these other things. If you could just go back one slide, sorry, Brad. Yeah, and on these sermons and video pages, these also have like a details page. So like on click of a thumbnail, it would take you to this details page, and then you would obviously have the embedded video of the sermon. Or you can see there's also like a button to click to donate or like get your sermon notes. So that's really neat. I should point out that like TouchPoint isn't going to be hosting these videos. Those are going to be hosted on like YouTube or Vimeo. And then you're going to be sending the URLs to TouchPoint, which will then flow into the website. But that way they'll be able to be utilized via these widgets. So they'll be able to be categorized and just, yeah, really easily sorted. And then the last slide here. So yeah, like I mentioned, we also can show audio files, PDFs, and web links. Now these won't have like a details page. We just kind of figure like if you're looking for a PDF, like just downloading it, it would be everything you want. And then with that, I'll hand it off to Brad. He'll talk about just like how it'll look to prepare your data on the TouchPoint side of things.
Awesome. Thanks, Shane. And so, Richard, I'm going to address your question here in just a few minutes. A great question regarding eSpace and how does that play into the events widget here. I also want to highlight, and Chris can speak more eloquently about this if you would like, but there's been a lot of efforts made in coordination with Chris and the team to make sure everything here works well and in concert with this new mobile app that you might have heard some about. So everything in terms of what Shane just said about the resources and the sermons and the URLs and the videos with Vimeo and YouTube, all of that is consistent. And so that's some of the beauty here of what we've tried to put together. And lastly, everything here is mobile responsive. So it'll look good on mobile. We just happen to grab screenshots from a desktop experience. So let's look in the back end of Touch. Yeah, go ahead.
Brad, if you don't mind, I might just expound on that just for a minute. So, and Barbara mentioned this really too, in really the desire to have a hub for where you're entering your resources kind of in one place or your events in one place, and then it pushes out to your mobile app, pushes out to your website. And so we've been working with Solertiae on this over the last year and redesigned a lot of things within TouchPoint so that TouchPoint can be that hub. And so if you're not familiar with the media and resources section within TouchPoint, it got renamed. We laid everything out. We added some new bells and whistles. And basically that is the place that you can organize all of your media and your content, including other resources, like maybe then Sunday school curriculums or small group curriculums. Some of those even that are that could be maybe hidden behind a certain role. The public ones would show up on your website like they should, but all of those will seamlessly flow into what we've been working on and teasing out over the last year, which is our new mobile app that's launching this fall, mobile app 3.0. Really excited. The last call I was on right before this was actually with some, what we're calling alpha churches who've been helping us give feedback, testing things. And some of those churches are actually going into beta testing right now. And so the app is coming together really nice. We've launched kind of the MVP version of it, and we're going to continue to build out new features and functionality. But to Barbara's point, TouchPoint can be the hub for that. So it's the one place that you can put an event and it would push out to your website, and it can push out to your mobile app now with this offering with TouchPoint Sites. The same for media and resources. You can manage all of that in one place. Yes, you can, it doesn't have to be YouTube or Vimeo. We support MP4, M3, U8, HLS, but you put those files into the TouchPoint management system, and then it pushes it out to the appropriate places and organizes that for you with the use of these widgets. And so Brad, I'll turn it back over to you where you can actually show how you can personalize the look and feel of how these look on your website. So that if you want them to look different than say the church down the road, you can do that with TouchPoint Sites. And so again, TouchPoint can be the hub for that, for managing your groups, your events, your resources, all of that kind of stuff. And we're really excited. We're going to be showcasing a lot more of that at Summit and over some webinars this fall, but this is the first part of this series launching with Sites here. So turn it back over to you, Brad.
Thanks, Will. I'm thinking about Will. Thanks, Chris. Haley, you can give Will a shout out. In fact, he's probably on this. So I was thinking about Will because what I was about to say is it just takes a ticket to Will's team to enable sites. And you can see there, you go to administration site settings, you see a whole another section here that's available, and you can enable each of the widgets discreetly. So if you want to use small groups, but not events, that allows you, if you want to control the amount of data that TouchPoint's allowing to be sent from your church database, you can discreetly control that and only enable data flow for what you want to send out. From a mapping perspective, you might be wondering, well, how do you configure target audience? Well, you can configure it however you want. It's set to a certain set of default values, but you can remap it to extra values as you see fit. And this is a section where you would do that. In terms of enabling it, besides enabling sites, we set a security token for you, which enables us to do the rest of the setup that Shane will show you here in a moment for you before you sign in your TouchPoint site for the first time. And one thing that we've done is we want to keep, least privilege in mind here. So everything we're sharing and showing with you does not necessitate Solertiae having any access to your church database. We can walk you through and do all of this setup, leveraging customer success through Will's team to get all of this set up for you. The other screen that I'll show you here is on the involvement itself. There's a new tab, and Chris, I believe this might be taken on a slightly new form in a couple of weeks in terms of the how it looks and whatnot. But basically, the takeaway here is you'll go to one location on the involvement to determine what about that involvement should flow to the mobile 3.0 and the sites. And so here it's simply showing sites. There's all kinds of other settings here that might be piquing your interest as it relates to the mobile app. But the short version is you go to one place on the involvement, and from there you can determine how you want to distribute it. Would you add anything there, Chris?
Nope. We are this is kind of the landing place where we put all of that, but all of that's being reorganized in some more logical places right now. But it's all there and it all functions. So we're just reorganizing it to make it easier.
All right, Shane, back at you. And so now we're back in TouchPoint Sites, so you all can see a little bit of a teaser of what the content management system platform looks like. And Shane, go for it.
Yeah, so this is a really simple to use CMS, like Barbara said. And I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit, which might be a moot point because I think for most of you, you're sort of what you sign up for, we will probably do this for you. But I'll just kind of showcase it anyways. So basically, you would just want to, the first step is establish a connection between your website and TouchPoint. And so you could like create a new collection, or if you already have one that exists, you could just duplicate it. And we're basically right now, we're pulling over 3 endpoints. So events, small groups, and media. But we have some other ones that have already been developed, but they just haven't been released. So like opportunities are going to be coming up, things like that. So you just need to put in your credentials. And then, yeah, so basically, yeah, you're just creating this connection. And then once the fields come in, like the website basically assumes like everything that's going to come over is sort of like a text. And then you just only have to update 2 fields. Like if it's actually an image, you'd say, okay, we're looking for an image type of data, not a text. And same thing for a link. We're not looking for text, we're looking for like a clickable text, if you will. So those are the only 2 things you would have to update. And again, assumedly, most of this would be done for you. And then the data will refresh every 2 hours. So like if you make a change on the TouchPoint side of things, you could expect that to be reflected on the website like every 2 hours. Or you could just go in and manually refresh it whenever you want, and then you'd see those changes immediately. So then moving on. The next step would just be dragging and dropping the widget onto the page that you want. So here in this little GIF, you could see like I could choose between like the resource widget or the involvement. So here we're going to do the involvement widget. I drag and drop it in there. And then I decide, let's go with the card view instead of the default calendar layout. So you see that now it's changing to a card view. And then I'm going to switch it to small group. So we make a distinguishing factor between like a standard event and a small group. And so now we have this layout. And so we can move on to the next slide. And basically what we'll do here is that we'll just tell it, okay, now that the widget's been placed on, let's say the small women's small group page, where do you want it to pull in the information from? And we'll just pull it in from the small group collection. So then you start to populate these fields. The platform is smart enough to where it already seems to populate about half of them for you. So if you can imagine, like there's a placeholder box that says like title, and then it's like, well, what information do you want me to put in there? Half the times it's smart enough to just know, okay, like we're looking for a title from the database and we'll just plug it in. But again, this is really simple. It's really easy to map. It just takes like a minute or so. And then the really cool thing is, like I already talked about, is you could pre-filter the content. So if we go on to the next slide, we kind of see that in action here. So this slide is talking about like configuring the colors. So you could add like, any colors you want to it and add like a favicon if you'd like. Then here you can see that like I've already styled up this widget the way I like it. And then I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste on this college page, right? So then I'll paste it here. And then all I have to do is just pre-filter the target audience from women's small groups to college. And then just like that, you have like all of the content perfect for that page. It just takes a minute. So it's really robust. We're really excited for that feature. And then this is the final stage. So everything is kind of working the way you want it to. It's, you have your widget on each page. And again, you just create it once and then copy and paste. And then you just have to configure your details page. So the thing to note here is that this follows like a templated structure. So if you have like a title, you could imagine, and like an image and a description, it's going to look like that for all of the details pages. But then if you like change your mind, you say, let's start with a hero image and then a title, then a description, or whatever you might want it to be, it's just going to follow that, that look. So again, this is just where you could render extra details, give people extra information. But a really important thing that I should mention is that you don't have to use these fields. So like if you want to put an embedded video on one of your details page, that's fine. But if not, you don't have to. It's not required. It's not going to have like an ugly placeholder. It'll just look the way you want it to look. It's designed to be as helpful as you want it to be.
Awesome. Thank you, Shane. So we're kind of accelerating here towards the end, conscious of time. I want to get to a couple of questions here that I see, but some of you might be wondering about other widgets that we haven't talked about. And so we tipped our hat a little bit to a volunteer opportunities widget. So imagine being able to provide a pane of glass into the volunteer openings by sourcing that information from the new volunteer scheduler in TouchPoint. Job postings, whether you're posting for new positions at your church or a staff directory or whatnot, being able to source that directly from TouchPoint, it keeps the data management side of it far easier. It also allows you to push it over to the mobile app if you wanted to. Mission trips or mission opportunities, online campus with mobile 3.0 chat integration. So I'll just leave that there. We could go into any number of conversations about that, but I'm really excited about that potential. Secure registration embed is something that we've been collaborating and with Adam Ash on the TouchPoint infrastructure side of things, and finding a very secure, robust way to include TouchPoint registration forms directly in TouchPoint sites in a way that maximizes the style and look and feel and consistency without sacrificing security. And then user awareness. In other words, the TouchPoint site knowing that a user, knowing who the user is if they've logged into TouchPoint in the same browser session. Before I move on, I also want to call out that for those of you that were at Summit and might have attended Adam's session, he talked a lot about new plans for the infrastructure and all the big visions and plans they have for this year. I'm looking forward to hearing how much of that he was able to bite off this year. But I can tell you that these APIs that are working here are running on Azure functions, which is part of that new infrastructure, along with the mobile app. So that's really exciting too. For some of you, you're like, well, we have all our sermons over in this service or that service, and just the idea of moving it to TouchPoint media and resources in and of itself seems like a tall order. If that's you, reach out. We have a process for that we're saying it's in beta, and it's largely in beta because we haven't iterated over it that many times yet. But it's a process that Chris's team has prepared a method to import. And we're working on a way to efficiently prepare the data for an import to hopefully make your life easier in your transition to sermons here. As far as the eSpace integration, we're starting to work on that this next month. We've already spec'd out what that could look like with Chris. And what you should note is that from the events widget, list and calendar view, everything is there that needs to be there to support the augmentation of what we'll do with the eSpace. But basically, we're going to take the eSpace API as it exists and add a lot more robustness to it, and so that you can continue to manage a lot more of your data in eSpace and have it reflect itself in TouchPoint. And if you're, Richard, if you want to hear more about that, or any of you, if you just make a note in the chat here, and as soon as we get those design specifications, full approval from Chris, happy to share those along to you so you can kind of be thinking about them in advance of us completing them. And then lastly, Jason, you asked a question about multilingual churches. So what I can tell you is, number one of the values that we can pass from TouchPoint to the widgets is a language. Number two, TouchPoint Sites itself can translate in up to 43 languages. What I have not tested, and Shane and I can confer, and Jason will make a note to follow up with you. But in theory, yes, the widgets, we should be able to translate them into Arabic, Portuguese, Chinese, whatever else you might want to do. We just haven't actually done that yet with the widgets, but we'll do it and send you a follow-up and let you know how that goes. But in theory, then yes, you can translate it into any number of languages that you might like. Chris, I saw you went off camera. Maybe it's to tell me that we're out of time.
No, we are short on time, but I'll let you finish up. I just wanted to mention one thing. If you're a church that's not using eSpace, we are looking at some enhancements as well that would allow you to put non-TouchPoint registrations into TouchPoint in a way that would allow you to pull it into the website as well. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit more this fall and at Summit, but I just wanted to mention that for if there are churches that don't use eSpace, that is one alternative thing that we are solving for. But eSpace is another great alternative for managing other events as well. So
awesome. All right, so I know we're a minute over. I just wanted, some of you might be wondering, well, this is great. Is anyone using it yet? And so this is where I answer that question. So we have several churches that have signed up. Now these API functions just went into production here in the last couple of weeks. And so a lot of the churches you see here are excitedly like getting set up, preparing their data, getting the widgets dropped in, so on and so forth. So to highlight a couple, if you're wondering, none of these are live. If you were to Google and find these churches, the only one that's running on TouchPoint Sites at the moment, and it has been for almost a year, in fact, since last Summit, is Cooksbury Church. A couple of these others will be going live soon. And if you are in Discord, TouchPoint's Discord, you can take a look at the Sites channel. We'll update folks on status. You can kind of see some of these as they launch. If you're not on Discord, I'm sure Chris can tell you how to go about doing that. It's a great community where it's lots of different chatter with some TouchPoint power users. But then I'll just quickly go over to next steps if you're wondering what to do. Number one, you can scan this QR code. You can go to touchpointsoftware.com/sites. You can drop something in the chat. And Chris, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'll end abruptly in respect for time.
Yeah, I know we are at the end of time. So if people need to drop, feel free to do so. But I just wanted to ask kind of Brad some options. So what if I, already have a website? What are my options? Can you help me clone that website, redesign a new website? What if I just want to launch some of these integrations side by side? Can you mention a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So all three categories can be considered. So the first one would be, it's been a couple years, I just want to reimagine my church website altogether. So we're going to call that a custom site, a strategy session. And that's something where you and your church will get to work real closely with Barbara, who spoke earlier in this webinar, to kind of reimagine what that is. And then out of that discussion, that design would be implemented into a TouchPoint site. Or maybe you're like, well, either we don't have the budget for that right now, or we just did a redesign and we're happy with how our site works. We're just keen to leverage these widgets. We offer a service, what we call cloning, which is basically we get your content from point A to point B, where you're able to leverage these widgets and run your website as it currently looks and feels on TouchPoint Sites. And then maybe you're really satisfied with your site. You don't want to clone it. You're happy with your content management system, or frankly, maybe you're more risk averse. Like, I want to get my feet wet and see what this is all about before I pull the trigger. Would you offer up what we're calling a hub site, which is basically a TouchPoint site that can run as a subdomain of your website, like members.yourchurch.com, where you can have access to all these widgets. And if you go to touchpointsoftware.com/sites, you can see a demonstration of how you can work a hub site in concert with your church website without moving it fully under the TouchPoint Sites platform just yet, if you just want to get your feet wet first.
Awesome. Well, thank you to Barbara, Brad, Shane for this partnership, and just a great presentation here on the hard work that your team and our team have been working on over this last year. And very excited to get this in church's hands. I know this will save a lot of folks a lot of time, especially in the communications team, but it just simplifies, the processes, which our goal is to really help you focus on ministry and streamline a lot of the back office things. And so this is one of those pieces of that. And so thank you to Brad, you and your team over there at Solertiae for all your hard work, and really excited to see some of these churches go live and answer any further questions that you all might have on this call. So thank you for joining us, everyone, today. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll be in touch. Take care.
Hey, Chris. Thank you, everyone.